Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais Perek Hey. We are still on Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Mem Zayin, starting on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph Mamish on the top of the Amid. And we just explained that in the first case of the Mishnah that we had on Daf Mem Hey in Halacha Aleph, when the Mishnah spoke about having Truma Tmeya that got mixed into Chulin Tohirin, but the chulin did not have the ratio of 100 to 1. So the truma is not nullified. And therefore, the status of the truma basically goes into the rest of the produce. Meduma. Since the truma is temeya, says the Mishnah, that on all of the produce, yirkavu, it should be left to decay. And we asked the question, why should it be left to decay? Okay, everything has the status of Truma Tameya. Truma Tameya doesn't have to be left to decay. So we had on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis, first of all, we really pointed out that it's a machloikes tanoim. Even according to those who say that it could be used as fuel, there itself, there's a machloikes amoiroim, whether it's only for bread or oil, or whether it's for everything. And the Gemara ultimately explained that even according to those opinions, that all of Truma Tameya may be used for fuel, the meaning of Yirkavu is not that you have to leave it to decay. It's not that you may not have benefit from it, but it's another leniency. That one is allowed, the owner, the Yisrael, who has Meduma, which theoretically would mean that all of it has the status of Truma. He may not keep any of it. He may not even sell any of it. Well, actually, he sells it, but the may... with a discounted price. So this is a big loss for the owner. So the Mishnah is saying Yirkavu, that he can leave it to decay, but what he's really hoping for is that while the produce is being left, so to say, to decay, B'shoigeg, someone not knowing that it's meduma, will add more chulin to hoiden. And if you add more chulin to hoiden, b'shoigeg, and you hit the ratio of 100 to 1, all of a sudden the owner, Taka, will have to give one saw away to a kohen. So what? One saw was anyways not his to keep. One saw was of truma. But he'll be able to salvage and to keep the rest. So that was a big chiddush of the Yirkavu. That is where we left off. The Gemara now, in the beginning of the Amen and beginning of today's daf, will give a couple of more qualifications that it's not that in all cases you may do such a thing. Don't forget that there are times that there is a fear that if the owner is going to leave meduma laying around, by accident, someone might end up eating it. Now, that's a terrible thing, because really the status of all of this produce is of truma. A non-kohen is not allowed to eat truma. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to touch today in today's daf. We're going to be going through the Mishnah and Halacha Aleph, but we're going to be touching on the following. We learned way back in the beginning, I think of the second chapter, that Daf Tezvav, Daf Tezayin, that if a person has two piles of produce that's tahar, produce that's tamei, you are not allowed to remove truma from the produce that's tahar for the produce that's tamei, which was a huge chiddush, because you would think, adarabba, if you are removing truma tahira for produce that's tamei, that's to the benefit of the kohen, which it is. But you're not allowed to do that. Really, when we began that sugya, it's a machloikes rishonim. All right, according to the Rambam, the Gemara's psukim is taka d'oraisa, according to most others, and that's the way we learned to sugya, that this is a din d'Rabbanan. And as we explain, min hamukaf, since truma has to be given min hamukaf means that the piles, if you're giving from one pile to the other, they have to be in close proximity. So the chances of these two piles touching are very high, and you're going to actually, if one of the piles are tamei, you're going to be spreading the tumah. That was the reason for the Mishnah. All of that led us to learn in the Gemara, and that's something very important for today, that the prohibition of giving truma tohoira for produce that's tamei is only by truma. But truma smaiser, and let's learn the way we learned our sugya. Since truma smaiser, it doesn't have to be given min hamukaf. And as we explained, the whole din of Min HaMukav is dafka because truma is not allowed to be given exact. You have to give it only from approximation, but you have to give it approximate. For you to get the 2% approximate, you have to have everything in front of you, Min HaMukav. Trumas Maaseh, that's exact, 10%. 10% you can measure. You don't have to put the two piles together. That's the way we learned to Sugya. Bottom line is that Trumas Maaseh is allowed to be given min hatohor al hatami. That is something that we learned before. That will be the base of a gewaldige discussion that we're going to have today. Ultimately, a machloikas between Rabbi Yossi and what the Gemara here calls kahana, what we call on the Babli Rav Kahana. Benegeya, one of the cases of our Mishnah where you have truma tohoira that fell into, we learned, either chulin or ma'aser or ma'aser sheni or hegdish. That was all of the four cases that the Mishnah gave. And we're going to come to a scenario where the question will be, are you allowed to separate ma'aser, trumas ma'aser, from that mixture when the truma is tahoira, but the chulin is tameim, the ma'aser is tameim? Will you be allowed or will you not be allowed to separate from that trumas ma'aser, from that ma'aser trumas ma'aser? Now, one thing is for sure, my friends, if I have ma'aser that's tamei, I'm allowed to separate from it trumas ma'aser, even though it would mean that it's going to be tamei. We also learn, as I just mentioned, even the better, I'm allowed to separate from tahor ma'aser trumas ma'aser, tahoira, from ma'aser that's tamei. That I am allowed to do. Only by truma do we say that you're not allowed to separate from tahor and tamei. By trumas ma'aser, you are allowed to do it. And all of that, again, that's going to be, I'm just giving you the basis of a big discussion between Rabbi Yossi and Rav Kahana, and it's going to be really fascinating. Whether we are looking at the moment of separation, whether we are looking at the moment of giving it to the kohen. Don't forget, when it comes to all of the tithings, really, there are two steps. The separation, the hafrasha, and then the nesina. Even though the Rambam counts it as one mitzvah, the Ramban, who by the way also counts it as one mitzvah, but he writes Akasha and the Rambam. Why should it be counted as one mitzvah? It should be two separate mitzvahs. More than that, just to know, I know I don't want to lose too much time over here. We're not losing time. I don't want to get distracted from other topics over here, but just one nekuda, that one of the understandings why the Chachamim said that you have to give a minimum amount of truma, whether it is 1 of 40, 1 of 50, or 1 of 60, even though midai raisa, chita achas, one little kernel is enough to exempt a whole pile, because even though mitzad the hafrasha, yeah, if you're mafresh one chita, you rectify the whole pile. But when it comes to the part of the gift, of gifting it to a kohen, how can you give such a minimum gift? It's not nice. It's not called a gift. You're giving him one kernel. No, it's the minimum amount is not so much about the separation of, it's more about we want for the gift to be something that's a gift. And not the opposite. You know, you want to give someone a gift, you give them something too little, better you shouldn't have given them anything. Anyways, we're going to come back over here, Rabbi Yossi, Rav Kahana, whether we are focusing on the giving, whether we are focusing on the hafrasha, as that will relate to one of the cases of the Mishnah. We're basically going to go review every single case of the Mishnah. God willing, we're going to have time to move on to the second part of the Mishnah, where you did have the ratio of chulin versus the truma of 101. And then we learned the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, that if you have truma tameya that fell into 100 chulin or more, 100 tohirin, first of all, it's nullified. You have the ratio. Second of all, we have the rule that you have to remove one soft truma. And Rabbi Eliezer holds, Gavaldik Shita, that he saw Shenafla and he saw Sha'olsa. He says that the one that you removed is biblically tamei. Why? Because we say that the one that you removed is the one that fell in. Since the one that fell in was tamei, the one that you're removing is tamei. That's the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim argue with that. We're not going to have enough time to get into the shita of the Chachamim, but what we will have at the end of today's daf, and this is Bahashgacha Pratas, we're learning this Chalamoyed, Sukkah is Tafshan Peivav. For those who are learning Daf Hayomi, today we are at Chavav, Chavzayin, who's here learning Daf Hayomi in Zvachim. We're going to be quoting a Mishnah in Zvachim, Daf Ayin Zayin, where we're going to have also a machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. We'll learn it when we learn it, and we're going to see that Rabbi Eliezer mamish follows the same opinion. Rabbi Eliezer l'shitas, it's going to be a beautiful correlation between two shitas of Rabbi Eliezer, all based on the same nakuda. But Chevra, let's go back. Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, on top of the Amid. So again, we are focusing on the first case of the Mishnah, where you did the first three cases of the Mishnah is where you did not have the ratio of 100 to 1. The first case of the Mishnah was where the Truma was Tameh, the Chulin was Tohirin. You did not have the ratio. The Mishnah said Yirkavu, and we asked why Yirkavu? So the ultimate conclusion of the Gemara that even according to the majority of opinions, Tanoim and then Amoirayim, that Truma Tameya doesn't have to be left to decay. You can use it as fuel. The owner has the right, it's a leniency, not to say it's Meduma, there's nothing that I can do with it. The coin gets it. No, he can leave it in his home, saying, I'm leaving it to decay. And why is he doing that? In the hope that someone, Bishoigeg, will add more chulin, and then you'll have the ratio of bittul. Once you have 100 to 1, the owner gets to keep it, right? If you have 100 to 1, the owner gets to keep his chulin. He only has to give one sa to the coin. Unlike where you don't have the ratio, then what do you have to do? You get to keep none of it. You don't have to gift all of it to the kohen, but you have to sell the chulin for a discounted price. So there's a big loss to the owner. So that was a chiddush. Yirkavu doesn't mean you have to leave it to decay. You can say you're leaving it to decay with the hope that there'll be an added b'shoigig. Someone is going to come and add it. So now on that says the Gemara, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, you may not always do that. When are you allowed to leave your meduma in the hope that some extra chulin will be added to it? Only if the item, the meduma, both the truma tameya and the chulin tohirin, are items that are not commonly eaten raw. In other words, they are eaten only after prep. No one is going to chop a nibble on it. No one is going to nash on it. And maybe someone is going to cook it. By the time you take it and you prepare it and you cook it, someone else, even if the guy that's doing it will forget it's meduma, someone else will see what you're doing and they'll remind you. In other words, there's no chashash that someone, bishoigeg, will eat it, which is the worst thing. Because, I'm not a kohen, I'm not allowed to eat it, it's meduma. Aval b'davar. We're going to go with the girsa. Shedar koi lehe ochel chai, but something that is commonly eaten raw, then you're not allowed to leave it to decay. Why? Because this might become a stumbling block, meaning someone will forget that this is a forbidden mixture. Someone will forget that this is meduma, and they'll end up eating it. Gewaldig. All right. Now, Zakti Gemara. Don't forget that when our Mishnah spoke about mixtures, just want to repeat the words of the Mishnah. And if you think you're dizzy, look at Cave and Walking. It's going to help you. Oh, so what did we learn in the Mishnah? I mean, the first three cases were when you did not have the ratio of 100 to 1. But what did you have? Forget about the quantity. The Mishnah gave four cases. You gave where Truma, Tameya Tohida went back and forth. But the Truma fell into Chulin, or into Meiser Rishon, or into Meiser Sheni. The Mishnah gave all cases. Or into Hegdish. And on all of these cases, the Mishnah said Yirkavu. Now, when Truma Tameya falls into Hegdish, I got another problem. What's the other problem? Again, how did we tie Yirkavu? Not that you have to leave it to decay. You are allowed to leave it to decay with the hope that in the future, don't forget, there you're not saving it for yourself. But right, Aviv, Hegdish doesn't belong to you. But who does Hegdish belong to? To the Beis Hamikdash. So what would be the advantage for the Beis Hamikdash if someone adds chulin? Because now the Beis Hamikdash, what's the most use it can use from it? Fuel. And by the way, only a kohen, because it's truma, right? If you're going to have more hegdish falling into it, if you'll have the ratio, then what? Oh, then the hegdish, then you have to remove the truma. Once you remove the truma, then whatever remains is edible, so there's more value. So the Beis Hamikdash will benefit by the weight if someone will add to the ratio. You getting this? Okay. There's a rule by Hegdish. That's going to be by Hegdish in general. You never say, let us wait for a better date, or let us go to a better location in order for a hegdish to benefit. Forget about mixtures. Stam, everything that belongs to the temple, almost everything that belongs to the temple wants to sell. The temple is using very few things on the Mizbeach proper. When people donated stuff to the temple, basically it was just a money donation. They would sell it. So there's a general rule. When someone donates an antique to the Hegdish, you should know that in big cities where people have more money, people pay money for antique, right? Or for jewelry. In villages, people don't pay that much money there. You're going to get less money. On market days, whenever there's more people in the market, generally, whatever you'll sell there, you'll get more money for, because you'll have many other people wanting to buy it. When you sell something on an off-market day, you're going to get less money because you have less people buying it. That's the way it works. So there's a general rule by Hegdish that we don't say by Hegdish, it's Hegdish, you have to wait until the market day. It's Hegdish, you have to go to a location where there you're going to get a higher price. We don't say that. We say that if the Hegdish has something, they sell it right here, right now. That's a rule of Hegdish. They have to, because there's always the fear that someone inadvertently will benefit from it. So that's going to be the Gemara's kasha. The Mishnah, you're telling me Yirkavu means you are allowed to wait in order for it. Maybe someone is going to add chulin, and then what's going to happen? You're going to have the ratio, and you're going to salvage. Instead of you needing to burn it, you'll be able to eat it after you separate the soft truma. But since one of the four cases, the final one is Hegdish, isn't there a rule? And there is a rule by Hegdish that ein lehegdish ela mekoymai v'shatoi. Mekoymai means you don't have to take it to a location where over there people are going to pay more money for it. Shaitoi means you don't have to wait for a market day. You don't have to wait for a later day, even if it's off season. Even though selling it now will mean you'll make less money, by Hegdish, that's what we do. So how does that fit with the fourth case? If Yirkavu would have meant what we thought it means, that it's a din, that it must be left to decay, that's something else. You're telling me Yirkavu means, you have the Maila that you are allowed to wait. Maybe there's going to be a bittul by Hegdish. And why do we want it for it to be bottled? By chulin, for me to be able to benefit from it. For me, the owner. By Hegdish, for Hegdish to be able to benefit. For Hegdish, we don't do that. So Rabbi Chanina has to say a big doichik. Amar Rabbi Chanina, it must be that in the fourth case of the Mishnah, the fourth example, in the first case of the Mishnah, where Truma was Tameya, the other items were Tohoidim, but the other items did not have the ratio. And the other items is chulin, Ma'aser Rishon, or Ma'aser Sheni, or Hegdish. By the Hegdish, that you have this meduma in a location that basically no one is there. No one is there. So even if you're going to go and use it for fuel, someone has to pay the money for fuel, right? You're not on the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is not actually using it. The representative of the Beis Hamikdash in the village, who knows where, his goal is to sell it and to send the money to the Beis Hamikdash. What happens if you are in a place where no one wants to buy it? Why would no one want to buy it if there are very, very few people there? You're living in a very isolated place. It's a place that got destroyed. It used to be a habitat. Now no one is there. So when you don't have people even to pay Demei Eitzim, then anyways you're not selling it. So Yirkavu means is that the owner is allowed to have this thing in his head. That what? I'm leaving it to decay. But what's my purpose? Maybe there's going to be someone who b'shoigeg will add more non-truma to affect betel. It's that type of kavana is allowed to be had. But be'emes, if by Hegdish you find someone to pay the lower Demei Eitzim price, there, because of a din in Hegdish, you have to sell it right away. Okay, weiter. Next case in the Mishnah. Okay, next case in the Mishnah. First three cases, this is the second of the first three. You don't have the ratio of 100 to 1, but here we're flipping it. Now, really, the Mishnah was not that clear. The Mishnah was very brief. The Mishnah spoke. First case was the truma, the one saw of truma was tamei. Second case of the Mishnah says im tohoira hoisa, which means if the truma was tahar And here again, it fell into chulin, or Ma'aseh Rishon, or Ma'aseh Sheni, or Hegdish. Now, what the Mishnah did not say explicitly was, and what was the status of that chulin, or Ma'aseh Rishon, or Ma'aseh Sheni, or Hegdish? In the second case, the Mishnah didn't speak it out. We spoke it out because the Gemara spoke it out. The second case of the Mishnah is pure and pure. Pure and pure. No, that was the ground zero rule of the Mishnah, that if you don't have the ratio, you got yourself meduma. And what do you have to do with meduma? I mean, the Mishnah have to say it somewhere, that you have to sell all of it to a kohen, but you have to sell it. You don't have to gift it. You only have to give to one saw. The other quantity is sold b'dmei truma, for the cheaper price. So the Gemara says, Hada Amra, I want you to know that the second case of the Mishnah was tohoiden b'tohoiden. And now you'll appreciate the third case in the Mishnah. Third case, like the second, like the first, where you don't have the ratio of 100 to 1, but in the third case, it was punkt fakert of the first. In the first case, the truma was tameya, which is the case that we started to learn today, and the other chulin, or Ma'aseh Rishon, or Ma'aseh Sheni, or Hegdish were tohoiden. The third case of the Mishnah was where the truma was tohoida, and the other items were tameim. Now you'll understand the hoida b'tameim is the third case. That im tameim chulin. Now let me review, guys. What did the Mishnah say? What do we do? What do we do is, remember, if the truma is tohoida, it fell into, let's just say chulin, less than 100. Everything is meduma, but the chulin is tamei. So first of all, we already said, what do you do with it? You gift it to the kohen. You know, you gift one to the kohen, you sell the rest of the kohen. So now the kohen has meduma. The kohen can't just go and eat it. Why not? Because if he's going to, let's say, take these kernels and make them into flour, and make them into a dough, which means adding water, what will end up happening? What will end up happening is that you're going to have a kibetza of tamei chulin, which imparts tuma to truma, that became susceptible because it became wet. So the Mishnah there introduced the four options that the Mishnah gave. The first one was nekudim. I'm not going to repeat all of them. Nekudim, which means make small loaves, even though you're adding water, since for truma, to impart food that's tamei, to impart its truma, it has to have the size of a kibetza or more. Okay, as long as the loaves are less than the kibetza, that's one solution for the kohen. Now, here comes the kicker, and I want to go back to the Mishnah. I'm going here to Daf Mem Hey Yomid Beis. So that was the third case, and I'm going to read it inside. If you're looking on Daf Mem Hey Yomid Beis, we're going 4 lines from the top of the Amid just to read the Mishnah. Ve'im Tameim Hoyu, and like we just said, Tameim Hoyu means that the truma was pure chevra, but either the chulin, or the Ma'aseh Rishon, or the Ma'aseh Sheni, right? Or the Hegdish, they were tamei. So like we just explained, you got yourself a problem. What do? You make small loaves. But look what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, Oison hachulin yoichlu nekudim oy kalois oy yoloshma peres oy yischalkum. I got a kasha. Why did the Mishnah say oisa chulin? Didn't the Mishnah give 4 cases? The Mishnah gave 4 cases, right? The Mishnah gave 4 cases. Look on that mem. Look on that mem aleph amid aleph, just to see the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah. I mean, everything. All of the 3 cases where it fell into either chulin, oy Ma'aseh Rishon, oy Ma'aseh Sheni, oy Hegdish. So the Mishnah should have says that if the truma was tohoida, it fell into any one of the 4 chulin, Ma'aseh Rishon, Ma'aseh Sheni, or Hegdish. It's the same thing. What do? It's not nullified. It's not nullified. Okay, so what happens? The Mishnah said in case number 2, you sell it to the kohen minus the truma. Okay, and the kohen cannot eat it. Why not? Because if he's going to eat it normally, he might make the truma tamei. So that's the solution. Item nekudim, etc. Why oisim chulin? Why did the Mishnah say chulin? I'll tell you why. It must be because prior to the kohen making the small loaves, first he resolves the Ma'aseh Rishon or the Ma'aseh Sheni or the Hegdish. Now, how do you resolve it? What would the kohen do? Well, Hegdish will just redeem. he'll make it into chulin. He wants to eat it. The kohen wants to eat his truma. If he's not going to resolve the hegdish, how can he eat it? So he pays for it. Good. Ma'aser sheni we also resolve. But even though the kohen can go to Yerushalmi, but it's more convenient. How do you resolve Ma'aser sheni? You redeem it on money. Easy. Same thing with Ma'aser Rishon. How do you resolve Ma'aser Rishon? You separate Trumas Ma'aser. And therefore, now, Ma'aser Rishon, just for the record, Ma'aser Rishon could be gifted to a kohen. A kohen is from the tribe of Levi. But the kohen, even though he's a kohen, cannot eat the Ma'aser Rishon prior to it having Trumas Ma'aser removed from it. In other words, the Mishnah basically wants you to know that Oisan Chulin, because prior to the kohen eating it, Nekudim or Koloyos or all of the solutions, he takes away the status of either the Ma'aser Rishon or the Ma'aser Sheni or Hegdish. He makes it first into Chulin. And now the Chulin you eat small loaves, etc. Okay. Now the question is, from where do you remove Trumas Ma'aser? Don't forget, the Truma in this case is Tohira. The Ma'aser Rishon is Tamei. What will happen if you will remove the Trumas Ma'aser from the Ma'aser Rishon? What would happen? Well, you are going to be creating Trumas Ma'aser that's Tamei. If you are going to be removing Trumas Ma'aser from another location, that Trumas Ma'aser will be tar, from tar produce. Then all you have over here basically will be Chulin. Chulin, Tamei, it's not the end of the world. The problem is that in the Chulin Tamei you have Truma. So that's why the Mishnah says the solution. If you make small loaves, it doesn't matter. You can eat it. You're never going to make the Truma Tamei. Okay. So says the Gemara that al daita de Rabbi Yoisa nicham, that removing the Trumas Ma'aser from another location, which is a chiyuv, that you have to remove Trumas Ma'aser from Toher Ma'aser Rishon for this. That makes sense. So let me, again, to go back to the words of introduction, if you missed the introduction, we learned on Daf Tezvav, Daf Tezayin. It's amazing. When people hear it, if they forgot it, they're shocked. You're not allowed to remove Truma Tohoira for produce that's Tamei. You would think you're doing a Gavaldik thing. You're not allowed to do that. Either a pasik or the pasik is an asmachta because of min hamukaf. We're not going to go back there. Trumas Ma'aser is allowed to be removed from tahar produce on Ma'aser Rishon that's tamei. You are allowed to do it. Do you have to do it? Well, according to Rabbi Yosi, in our case, you have to do it. You have to do it. Why do I have to do it? Because the Omar Rabbi Yosi b'shem Chizkiah and Rabbi Yoina b'shem Rabbi Yanai, that the psukim that we learned, we're going back to that sugya, that Truma Tohoira is not allowed to be removed for produce that's tamei. But Ma'aser Rishon, that's tamei. Ma'aser Rishon, that's tahor. Both of them have to have Trumas Ma'aser removed from it. I am allowed to remove all of the Trumas Ma'aser from the Tohorim, which is good for the Kohen. For both the Tohir and the Tamei, you could remove it. The source for that, according to Rabbi Yosi, came from a pasuk that you should give from it, meaning from the Ma'aser Rishon. When you remove the Trumas Ma'aser, Trumas Hashem la'aharon hakoyen. We know Aaron is a koyen, right? It can say la'koyen or la'aron. La'aron hakoyen is to tell you, asay, see to it, that when you remove Trumas Ma'aser, it should be given in a way where Aaron, as a kohen, is allowed to eat it. In other words, there is an advantage of having the Trumas Ma'aser Tohoirin. Like this, when the kohen receives it, he's able to eat it. Look inside before we turn to Amid. The last big marafulda. Now we're going to already introduce over here the sheet of Rav Kahana, which we're going to get to on Amid base. Right, it's around 8 lines from the bottom, all the way right in the middle of the marafulda under the Gemara. Al date the Rabbi Yosef Nichon, etc. Kasha leila shas. Really, what are we addressing? Like we spoke out that lo monok nahamas nisim ve'im temeim hoyo hachulin. Why did the Mishnah speak about a case where chulin? Why? Say stam. Why stam? Because the Mishnah began by telling you where the truma fell into either chulin or ma'aser rishon or ma'aser sheni or hegdish, and in all of these cases, you have the same solution of making them into small loaves or eating them just roasted or whatever or mixing meiperos or putting it into tarred flour. Ella vadai, you know why? The reason why the Mishnah did not say it that way to be marames, that if the truma temeya fell into ma'aser rishon, if truma tohoira fell into ma'aser rishon temeim, you cannot remove from the ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser. Why? Because the imkain mafsid hu hatruma. Because even though I'm allowed to remove from ma'aser rishon temeim trumas ma'aser, I'm allowed to do that. But if there is also truma mixed in it, which is our case, I don't want to have a mixture. What's ma'aser rishon? Truma. What's trumas ma'aser? Truma. Trumas ma'aser is truma. I'm not allowed to have a mixture of truma tohoira and truma tameya. I can't do that because I ruin the truma that was started. Shali de kain yia asur lo'ichla bishvil hatrumas ma'aser shemu urava v'hi asura sharei ma'aser rishon tamehu. In other words, guys, even though if I have ma'aser rishon tahor and ma'aser rishon tamei, I am allowed to remove from the ma'aser rishon tahor trumas ma'aser for both the tahor and the tamei. I'm allowed to do that. I don't have to do that. If I have ma'aser rishon tameim, I can remove from it what? Trumas ma'aser. And if it's tamei, okay, so the kohen can only burn it. But if I have also truma mixed into it, that's the case of our Mishnah, that was not batal, and the truma is tahoira. In this case, according to Rabbi Yossi, I'm not allowed to remove from the ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser. Because when I do that, that trumas ma'aser will become tameim, is tameim. There is also truma that's tahoira. Now I'm creating a mixture of truma that's tahor and tamei. That's not something I'm allowed to do. Why? Because it says when you remove trumas ma'aser, give it to Aaron in a way where Aaron can eat it, which means I'm not allowed to take something that's tahor, truma, tahoira, and make it tamei. Now look inside the second to last line of the Meraful, the lefikach, and therefore the only solution would be, if the Mishnah's case would be on the case of the Mishnah, where you have truma tahoira that fell into ma'aser rishon tameim, that has to be made into chulin anyways. Tzarich lahafresh shalom mimakam acher v'lasoisei chulin nemseis hakol chulin and lefikach leinakat atana rak chulin sha'akoil b'chloloi. Turning to daf mem zayin omid bey, so that works. The Gemara and the Havamina thinks that since the psukim that Rav Kahana brought above in the sugya of removing ma'aser rishon, tahor, and tamei, he quoted another pasuk. And what pasuk did he quote? Al date de Kahana du Amar, toil min hamikudoy shaboy, toil min hamikudoy shaboy. And the pasuk that he brings says the marafulda is v'hari moisim mikol chelboy es migdashoy mimenu. So the simple pshat is that when you remove trumas ma'aser from ma'aser rishon, remove it from the best. Remove it from the best. Rav Kahana learns from it that you see to it that when you separate the trumas ma'aser, the separation already should be done in a state of tahara. should be done in the state of tahara, and look inside them at afulda. Let's read the whole thing. Valzehik shashas al data the Rabbi Yosef nicha shu yalef leila perek sheni she'eim tormun element atoyer midich siv v'nesat emenu turus alar koyin asay shitli adam bechul nasoi koloimer sheyachalu lechel bechul nasoi. He should be able to eat it. In other words, and since the pasuk that he brings is about the gifting it to, it's not about the separation of it, it's about the gifting it to. The kapit kra anesina, that it has to be done betara. Lefikach eni yachal likroi shein l'trumas meiser. The imkein yafsed truma shul yichal koyin lechel bechul nasoi, as we explained. But according to Kahana, that learned the din above from another pasuk, and that pasuk is not speaking about the gifting it to the kohen. That's the key. The pasuk that Rav Kahana learns it from is from the separation from it. The pasuk is mikol chelboy es mikdash mimenu tol min hamekudash boy. The haikra bahafrosh ksiv lefikach Amar Rabbi Yosi loshen nesina. The Kahana loshen netila means hafrasha. Im kein hachinami. That's the Gemara's havamina. Lechura yikra shein letrumas meiser vahatruma have a shaper toil min hamekudash boy sharei frisha betara. If you have, guys, if I have my sedition that's tamei, if I separate from it trumas meiser, did I ruin anything? No, I didn't. Everything was tamei. The my sedition was tamei. Now, if I have truma mixed into it, so what? All I'm doing right now is I'm separating trumas meiser. The problem now is that after I separate Trumas Meiser, when I'll give it to the Kohen, since there is also Truma Tohoira, now the Kohen has a mixture of Tohir and Tamei. The problem is the Kohen who will get it won't be able to eat it. But as far as this separation is concerned, the Gemara's Havamina is, maybe Rav Kahana will allow you to do it. So the Kasha is, again, why did the Mishnah say, in the third case, that when Truma Tohoira fell into the above, so make the mixture of chulin into small loaves. Why? Why not say make the ma'aser rishon into small loaves? Make the ma'aser sheni into small loaves? Why not also speak about the case of ma'aser rishon? When l'chu'ura, according to Kahana, you will be allowed to take from the ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser and give it to the kohen. So the Gemara says, no, even if Kahana will admit that if you have truma mixed into it, you're not allowed to separate from the ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser, because you are ruining the truma. Why would you ruin the truma? The only time Rav Kahana will allow the a person to separate when there is truma to hoira mixed into ma'aser rishon, Rav Kahana will allow you to separate from this ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser, if you own the truma. I want you to know that a Yisrael can own truma. We have this on occasion, which would be if he was yoyrish. That means his mother is a bas kohen. The Zayda owned truma. The Zayda passed away. Let's say he only had daughters, and the daughter married a Levi. So it's possible for a Levi to own truma. What's if he owns it and a chanami? But if you have to gift it, says the Gemara, af al gav, the kahana amar tamon min hamekudash boy, we are agreeing that there will be a scenario where Rav Kahana, who emphasizes the issue of its separation, not on its gifting to, there will be a time, which will be what we're saying right now, if you're not gifting it at all, where you will be allowed to separate from the ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser. But moide, in our case, the davar shuhu zakoy klitnoy lekoyin, that even kahana's moida, you're not allowed to separate from tamei ma'aser rishon trumas ma'aser if there is truma mixed into it, because you're ruining the truma. And therefore, prior to the separation, you have to make everything into chulin. That's why the Mishnah said chulin. This is gavaldik. And now we're moving on. Another thing. So what do? Look, now you have, so you have chulin. So the Mishnah says the four options. The first option is make it into small loaves. What's the chiddush? What benefit? The Mishnah used the words nikudim. So the Gemara says, when it says in the Mishnah, yei achlu nikudim, I want you to know that the hadi nikudim, the loaf that we call in nikudim, which is small, is a half a beitza. By the way, half a beitza doesn't mean half. It means it's less than a beitza. And I'm really curious today to know if the bilkalach are a beitza. I think they are. The bilkalach are a beitza. I know there's a tshuva of the Noidi Yehuda, because every now and then everyone gets irked, all of us. It's like, how is a shayach kezayis is the size of the kezayis in halacha, or the kibetza is the size of a kibetza. There's a Noida Yehuda that says that in the times of Chazal, a zayis was double the current size. A betza was double the current size. That would fit. When you apply it in halacha, the way it sounds to when you look at the ounce, you look at, you have to eat a third of a matzah to have a kezayis. It almost sounds like the kezayis was the size of a kibetza, and the kibetza is like double the size of today's kibetza. The Noida Yehuda says that. I'm not saying that we follow that, but anyways, half doesn't mean half. Half means less. Okay, and now we're moving on to the final topic of today. And again, for those of us, today is Chai Tishrei. Today is Daf Chavav. For people that are learning Daf Hayomi, Tavshin Pei Vav, Chai Tishrei is Chavav, Daf Chavav and Zvachim. At least we're touching on Masechta Zvachim. And we're going to Daf Ayin Zayin. So let's go back now to the next case in the Mishnah. We're just reviewing the Mishnah. The next case of the Mishnah, the next two cases of the Mishnah is where you had the ratio. Okay, don't get nervous. We'll go. Every case is simple. Here again, the truma was tamei. 1 saw of truma tameya. I have 100 saw of chulin tohidin. It got mixed. First of all, you have the ratio. So what happens? It's not meduma. It has the status of chulin, but I'm not allowed to eat it because I had 100 saw. The one of truma was never mine. I had to give it to a kohen. I didn't give it yet. It's not mine. You can't say it's batel and now I can eat 101 saw. It's not fair. So what do you have to do? You have to remove one. What is the status of that one? What would you say? You have one tamei, fell into 100 chulin tohidin, batel, but you have to remove it.
Is that tamei part also batel?
Yeah, because the truma was batel. Because if the truma would not be batel, then a non-kohen cannot eat any of it. And Rabbi Eliezer had this big chiddush, a chumrah. He says, since you have to remove one, halachically we view that he saw a shenafla, he saw sha'olsa. The one that you removed is the original one. What happens if you say that? It's tummy.
The one you removed.
Yeah?
Even
though the likelihood that when you had this mixture and now you're removing random one from the 101, it's a big chiddush, but Rabbi Eliezer says that's what we say. It's not an exchange, it's the same one. Very good. The Chachamim hold that it's a financial din. You have to give one to the kohen because financially you don't own 101. Midoiraisa, according to the Chachamim, the one that you remove the star, because the tumah is also batel. What's the truma's batel? That's what you were saying, Aviv. Is the tumah batel? Rabbi Eliezer says no. Why not? Because since you have to remove one, that's the one. If that's the one, why would it be batel? It's amazing. So the Gemara says, I want you to know that this type of logic, Rabbi Eliezer has elsewhere. Now let me tell you the elsewhere. Well, it's a Torah logic because according to Rabbi Eliezer, when you remove the one, that is tamei midoiraisa. That's also why we said that what happens if this one that you removed falls into chulin? According to Rabbi Eliezer, you need another 100 to be mavatalit because we view the one that you removed to have been the original one. Let me go to the case of Zvachim. Have a carbon oil. It's very simple. And you already shechted the carbonis. You already cut up the carbon as they have to be cut up to be burnt on the altar. All of it has to be burnt. But you have many carbonis. You have many carbonis. And what happens if some of the pieces of the oila, you discover, oh my God, the animal was blemished. An animal that was blemished may not be offered as a carbon. And now that you found out the animal was blemished, you're not allowed to put it on the altar. Problem is that these pieces got mixed with other pieces. So what do you do now? So the rule number one is that since karbanos are chashuv, even the cut up pieces, something that's halachically important is never nullified, which is bad. Which basically means none of these pieces can be put on the altar. But, says Rabbi Eliezer, listen to the final case, what happens? You had the mixture, you shechted karbanis, you cut up the pieces. You discovered, let's say you have 20 karbanis. One of them was blemished. Oh my God. So now we're saying none of the pieces can be put on the altar. A kohen didn't know about all that. A kohen took the pieces equivalent to one animal and he put it on the altar. We don't know which ones he took. You know what Rabbi Eliezer says? All of the remaining pieces can be brought on the Mizbeach. Because we say that the ones that were put, those were the ones that were blemished already. They were put already. You see the comparison? Mamish the same. Just like we say over here, that he saw a shenafla, he saw also, it's gevaldik. Here we're saying it as a chumrah, but the logic is the same. Same, Rabbi Eliezer follows his opinion. Let's read it inside. So when the Mishnah says, sa'a truma tameh, that it fell into 100 chulin, and you have to remove one. And Rabbi Eliezer says, sa'a shenafli, sa'a also, amar Rab Simen, gavaldik, Rabbi Eliezer kedate. In the Bavli, it's keshitosoi, which is, kamadu amar taman. Just like he says in Masechta Zvachim daf ayin zayin, that if you had this mixture, and then on top of that comes a kohen who didn't know that there's a mixture, he removed pieces of limbs equivalent to one carbon, and he burnt it on the altar. So Rabbi Eliezer says, now that he did that, you can bring up the rest. Why? Because kol hapsulin ala biyadeh, because we say that what the kohen put on the mizbeach was the problem. The problem was already removed. So why not now do the good? This is so beautiful. It's the same logic. It's Cain, who oimer hache gevaldik. So here we say the same thing. That the saw that fell in, now that you removed one, that is the problematic saw, which is, that's the tumah. You removed all the tumah. It's the best of all of the worlds. And I know it's late, but I just want to repeat, I heard this from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Shapiro, that in the 70s, when he just moved to Miami, there was a shlachtois over there that shechted twice a week kosher chickens. It was a chicken shlachtois, and the rest of the week it shechted a treif. So imagine, so you're dealing with a factory that has batches of kosher and treif, and there was a mixture. Okay. Got mixed, and we're talking about tens of thousands of chickens. The mixture was such where there was bittul, halachic bittul, and that Ramah paskins what we're learning over here. The Machaber says it's nullified and you can have all of them, just not at the same time. The Ramah says you have to remove the quantity. And they called up Rab Zalman Shimon Devarkin from Crown Heights, and he paskined, everyone knows the din, you got to ask her of, that let's say there were 10,000 treifa chickens into much more kosher. The majority was kosher. Remove 10,000 chickens. They removed the 10,000 chickens. You're removing them random. He says a few days later, the federal government has their own FDA, whatever it is, and they were megala their soy to Rabbi Devarkin of blessed memory, that they put a siman of what's kosher, what's treif in their markings. Now, there were still those chickens in the market, in the kosher markets. Now we know how to discover what's kosher, what's treif. So they went into the markets to see maybe there's some treifa chickens in the markets. Not one treifa chicken was found in the market. Wow. In other words, when we followed the halacha, the ones that we removed were the ones that were problematic. This is siyata d'shmaya, that when you follow the halacha, you get it right. And
we're not saying he got lucky, right?
Not lucky. We saw a revelation of God. A given with the Torah,